These are things that Aspies tend to value, or if they don't value, they really should value. Number one is friends. People with Asperger syndrome tend to place a tremendous amount of value on friends because, hey, look, if you don't have many, if something is rare, if a commodity is hard to come by, then you tend to value that commodity. My parents grew up during the Great Depression. My dad, in particular, was concerned about one thing, and one thing just kind of stood out in his mind always, and that was employment. It was very important for him and all of his kids to have a good job because, during the Depression, people didn't have work. It was like, I don't know, maybe a third of all the men back then couldn't find a job, and the women, by and large, stayed home, most of them. So he valued work. He valued employment. He valued having a job, and he worried about us as we were growing up that we would find secure employment. Well, same thing is true of friends. When you find them to be rare, and the few, quote, friends, unquote, that we have often aren't friends at all, but they're just taking advantage of our gullibilities. When we do find those true friends, we value them. Now, word of caution. Sometimes we have friends, and I hate to say it, but we can not value them too much, but we can suffocate them because it's only a friend I got, or maybe I just have a handful. And sometimes we get too close to them, closer than they want us to be. It's not that they disfriend us or disavow us, but we got to be careful about that. Number two is people with Asperger's syndrome value themselves, or they should. Now let's stop and think this through for a second. Who should be your best friend? Personally, I think we should each be our own best friend, and here's why I say that. Because if you don't like yourself, if you can't befriend yourself, why would you expect anyone else to befriend you? Why would you expect anyone else to like you? Well, what is it about you that you don't like and is changeable? Why don't you work on changing that? We're not perfect, we all know that, but it goes back to this. We need to learn to trust ourselves. We need to learn to have confidence in ourselves. Maybe it's difficult. Maybe it's difficult to find work, like we were talking before. Well, guess what? We can always employ ourselves. There's always something, well, I shouldn't say always, but typically, there's something that we can do that gives us some gainful employment. I mean, got to be something. But if you don't take care of your friend, that, speaking of yourself, if you don't take care of yourself, why would you expect anyone else to be concerned about you? So the way to show others that you are worthy of their friendship is to, well, befriend yourself. Show others that there's some value here and I value myself. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm not talking about coming across as aloof, which a lot of Aspies do unintentionally. I'm not talking about narcissism. I've got a whole channel on narcissism, and I'm as far away from that as I possibly can be, or at least I would guide people as far away from that as I can. No, we're talking about simple self-respect. There's this thing in the Bible, I can't cite the exact verse, chapter and verse, but it basically says that we are to love others as we love ourselves. Well, you can't love others as yourself if you don't love yourself. That's a healthy type of love. That's a good kind of love. So let me just ask you this question. When you look at yourself in a mirror, do you like what you see? Are you loathed by your own image? I know some people are, and it's because they've been trained to. Throughout their entire lives, they've been told they're a bad person. And they internalize that. That's something that, hey, look, guys, we need to get that out of our heads. That just because other people think we don't have value, just because we were somebody easy to pick on, 20 years ago or whenever, maybe 20 minutes ago, what does that have to do with us? I mean, we need somebody to stand up for us, right? Okay, I'm going to stand up for me. I'll be my best friend. Number three is this. People with Asperger syndrome tend to value what I call their sacred space. Now, your sacred space could be just about anywhere. Now, you can see here, I've got this little cabin that I work out of. I bought this years ago when my business started to decline, and it just became economically more feasible to put up my own little building than to rent office space because I no longer needed employees. So if I'm going to pay for workspace, why not own it, right? So I bought this place, but this becomes my sacred space, or one of them. Now, I know what some people are thinking. Yeah, well, how many people have cabins where they can get away to? Well, not many, but sometimes, my car is a sacred space. Just driving alone, maybe going to the grocery store, maybe one of my frequent trips to the doctor. That happens, as you get older. That's a sacred space. Turn on the radio if you want, listen to the music you want. You still have radios in your car. I haven't played a radio in my car for, I can't remember. I don't. I know I used to, but I can't remember the last time I played a radio. But whatever you play, your music, whatever format it is, that's your time. That's your sacred space. That's kind of it's not the same thing as a church, because a church is where people congregate together, but still, it's kind of a type of church where this is just kind of a holy, sacred place where you're just grateful for what you have, and we're going to get to that a little more in just a moment. Something else that Aspies find that are very valuable, or a thing that Aspies find is very valuable, is time. We understand because, Aspies tend to be logical people, rational people. We tend to categorize things. Now, I don't know who set up the 24-hour clock, and I don't know how they decided to put it into 60 minutes and each one into 60 seconds, or who figured out how to divide the day into 24 hours. Somebody had to do that. My best guess is, and I don't really know, but my best guess is, that was probably a person with Asperger syndrome, because they like things to be neat and in order. Nice and tidy. What is more tidy than time? Well, people with Asperger syndrome understand this, that you don't take time to do anything. I actually talked about this in another video a few weeks back, but you don't take time to do anything. Time takes itself. It just goes. If you don't use it, you lose it. Aspies understand that principle, and we tend to value time. So we use time, but we try not to let time slip away without us taking advantage of what we have there. We value time. Now, I know some people who have Asperger syndrome, and bless their hearts, they cannot be on time for an appointment if their life depended on it. I get it. Maybe that has nothing to do with Asperger syndrome, but personally, I like to be places a little bit early. If I'm going to meet somebody, I talked about this maybe last week. If I'm going to meet somebody or go to an appointment, I usually leave early, just in case there's bad traffic or, something happens. You never know. Worst case scenario, you show up early. What's wrong with that? Once a month or so, I go to get my blood checked, and I show up 15 minutes early every week, and they've come to expect it. So if they set my appointment for, say, 7:30, they're ready for me at 7:15. Why? Well, I got this thing in my head where I just value time. Do you value time? Maybe you're different. No two people with Asperger syndrome all fit all of these categories. Now, what's more, I may be leaving something out of here. So if you can think of something that maybe you value that I'm leaving off this list, you might want to let me know about it. So when we do talk about this again, when we do it again, that may be something that we can add to the list. These are basically based on my experience, Pushing 70 years old, seen a thing or two. I'm just sharing with you some of my experiences. Something else that we tend to value very highly is just innovation. Aspies appreciate the innovation and the inspiration that leads to innovation. Now, if you stop and think about this, that we are surrounded, right this very moment, we are surrounded with someone else's innovation. A lot of people don't think about that. They don't even stop to consider that somebody had to have an idea how to put all these little ones and zeros together and come up with massive computing. To me, that I just marvel at that. Are you the type of person that can go out at night, preferably when it's warm out, not in the middle of the winter, but go out at night, lay on your back in the grass or wherever, and just stare up at the stars? I almost said scars. Stare up at the stars and just amazed at what's out there. And to think that you're just looking at the surface of the surface of the surface. There is so much beyond that. I find that a lot of Aspies, again, not all of them, are intrigued with astronomy because they can see how complicated, I guess, everything is, and yet it all works together. Absolutely amazing. Number 6 is, this is kind of tied in. People with Asperger syndrome, it seems to me, are people of gratitude. Remember, we touched on that a second ago. When I'm talking about gratitude, that goes back to what we were talking about friends. We are very grateful that we have friends. If we have friends, we're very grateful for them. We are grateful for the people who come in our lives and have been courteous and kind to us, because there have been so many that have been discourteous or unkind to us. So we value people who are decent people. And it seems to me, I don't know, maybe 5% of the world's population are what we would call true empaths. I don't know, I'm just guessing. We also value our possessions. We don't put possessions above things, at least I don't think we do, above things like love or friendship or ourselves. But still, if we have something, we're grateful that we have it. We don't take things for granted. We are grateful for our health. The older you get, by the way, the more grateful you become. When I was a pastor years ago, I would ask people, what are you grateful for? What are you thankful for? And inevitably, there'd be some older person, one of the senior citizens in the church, who would say, I'm grateful for health. Why? Because, well, they haven't had it. They've had some tough times health-wise in recent weeks, recent months. So when they get over the symptoms or the disease or the disorder or the injury, whatever it is, they are so grateful not to have that in their lives anymore. And by the way, have you ever stopped to think about this from this angle? One of the benefits of having challenges in your life is that those challenges, those difficulties, those problems make you appreciate when you don't have them. Right now, the last thing on my mind is how good my teeth feel. I mean, when was the last time you were sitting around and thinking, my teeth really feel good? Say that out loud and people look at you like you're weird. But if you've ever had a toothache and finally you get to the dentist or whatever and you get that thing taken care of, all of a sudden you have this gratitude for how good your teeth feel. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about gratitude that comes as the result of having hurdles and barriers and challenges and problems and hurts in our lives. And people with Asperger syndrome have a lot of those, probably more than maybe anybody else. So we tend to be grateful people because we appreciate what we have. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Remember that? So sometimes we don't appreciate our health and all these other things until we lose it. But then when we get it back, we're really grateful. Number 7, finally, is this: just understanding. People with Asperger syndrome, at least I know this is true for me, really appreciate other individuals who understand what I'm going through or what it's like to be an Aspie. Now, I got to tell you, there aren't too many people like that out there. If you've ever tried to hold down a job, talking about that earlier, if you've ever tried to hold down a job while you have Asperger syndrome, and if you have Asperger syndrome, then you've had it your entire life, you know how difficult it can be to hold down a job simply because people look at you kind of strange. You live in that uncanny valley where you're not quite human, almost like 99%, but the way people look at you is you're just not quite on the same species, are you? I mean, who is this guy? Well, there are some people who understand what you're going through, and they may not accommodate you ridiculously, but still they accommodate you enough to make it understood that they are not patronizing you, but they understand they really like you. They want to help you. They want to do everything they can within reason to make sure that you have a pleasant, experience, a place in this life. You see those 2 rectangles on the screen. If you like what you heard, we encourage you to keep the conversation going. If that's what you want to do, just click on one of those rectangles. I keep trying to say triangles. And we'll keep the conversation going. If not, well, we'll see you all next time.